Welcome to another edition of Midnight Cable. I'm Giman.
And I'm Brandon. And in this show, we talk about anime that we have watched recently, both new and old.
Yeah, and this week we return to a genre that we started with the first episode, mystery anime. We kind of want to watch something easy and stay away from the bad stuff for a while. So the first anime we watched was ID Invaded. If I were to try to describe this show, imagine if Psycho Pass was combined with Matrix and Inception, so you can imagine what a real mind trip that would be.
And the other anime that we watched is The Perfect Insider, an anime based on a classic Japanese mystery novel from 1996. Both anime are radically different from each other, so this would make a very interesting discussion.
Yeah, so let us first begin by talking about ID Invaded. ID Invader begins in a void, where a young man dressed in flamboyant clothing wakes up with no memory other than his name is Sakaido, a brilliant detective whose task is to solve the murder of a girl named Kaeru. Or at least, that's how it appears at first. Sakaido's real name and person is Akihito Narihisako, a former detective and now a convicted criminal. He works with an investigation team solving homicides by diving into criminals' ID wells. However, Akihito is haunted by his past, as he lost his family 2 years ago before the current events. He is eventually joined by Hondomachi, a new rookie, who after doing a certain incident came to possess same qualities as him. Together, they discover various clues about John Walker, a mysterious person connected to the birth of new generation of serial killers. They soon discover that the plot is not just a layer on top of a layer, but a layer on top of a layer on top of another layer. So, Brandon, what did you think of ID Invaded?
Well, I mean, from the description that we gave earlier, the concept and the, overall theme of this anime is not entirely original or unique. Because, it reminds us too much of Psycho Pass, Matrix, Inception, and even Mindhunter and Dexter to certain aspect. However, despite saying that, I still enjoyed this anime, and I think the story and the character was good, and action scene was acceptable. There was some hiccup when it comes to visuals, but mostly just nitpick from me. Overall, a very good anime.
Yeah, pretty much. Although, for me personally, I thought it was good, not great, but good nonetheless. Though I do feel like that I'm missing something here, because people seem to praise a lot about this show. And while the plot is nothing original, like you said, I think, the mind screw part, actually charms us a lot in that sense. And even though it's a case-by-case structure, like many other mystery shows, I thought that that kind of structure and its build-up was executed really well. So I thought that it was a fine show in that sense. Characters! So when it comes to the characters, I think it's both this show's, one of the show's greatest strength, but also maybe its greatest weakness. Because while I think the main cast with the main characters are all entertaining, when it comes to the supporting cast, aside from some of the characters like main character's friend Momoki, I think he was, and that Hondomachi's police partner, who before she was transferred into another unit, I think when it comes to the rest of the supporting characters, in this case the investigation team, their only role in the story is just to, to explain the plot, or to be more accurate, observe what Narihisako is observing, and and then just to explain that where exactly the perpetrator is or what their motive is, and then they just capture them. While it works at first, at least with the 75% of the running time, by the time the climax happens, aside from those few ones that actually matters to name, all of them are just take a backseat, that they don't have any purpose. And while I might not like the supporting cast that much, since they're just there to explain the plot, but thankfully the show is carried through the ones who are actually doing something, which are our three main characters.
Yes, I agree with you completely. This show reminded me so much of Psycho-Pass that it hurts. Like down to every single character and every single archetype that they play in the story. I really like the main character, Narihisago, or as he known in the ID well as, Sakaido. Very intriguing and interesting character, despite him being an amalgamation of, Shinya Ogami from Psycho-Pass and, a tiny bit of Dexter from that Dexter TV show. I feel like, it was kind of effective. It served this duality well that, this, is a cop with his own twisted sense of justice, but at the same time, it's also a psychopathic, person who can kill another person without any regret and has an actual true dark nature.
Yeah, I think the episode 3, establishes a lot. I mean, the first 2 episodes kind of paints him as this really uninteresting character with the fact that he looks really messy in his real life person compared to his virtual self. What I liked about the 3rd episode is that even though he helped, book up, this really disturbing criminal who wants to, kill people with bombing, then just to witness that, glorious scene in the battlefield. He's revealed to be sort of almost like a Hannibal Lecter type of character that he, like in that Silence of the Lambs movie where he convinces this one guy in his cell to kill himself by, I think it was something about swallowing his own tongue or something, and and Narihisaku kind of just the same to this one guy that he talks to him to kill him himself. Then while he's not technically a serial killer, but due to the past things that happened to him that kind of made him out to be like that he kind of tries to cling to his humanity, like with his friendship with the leader of the investigation team, Momoki, but at the same time he's kind of haunted by his past and he kind of has this driving need to kill. Not that he wants to, it's just like whenever he sees another criminal like that he just feels like he wants to talk them down so that they will die like insignificant bugs they are in front of his eyes. Yeah,
I mean, I like his character design as well, both in real life and also in the ID well. It had this very noir, wacky detective looks to him. I also like his backstory. While initially, like you said, very bland in the first half of the show, as we watch more and dive more into his character and his history, it was very, emotional watch. We learn about his backstory, how he's connected to all these serial killer, what happened to his family. Spoiler alert, they got killed. We already mentioned that.
Or did we?
But yeah, it was emotional, but it was also at the same time, very engaging and enjoyable to watch. And I like his character very much.
Yeah. Though thankfully there are these 2 other characters that worked really well, and I think the one that I liked was because of her relationship to this one character, but let me talk about her first. The one I'm talking about is, Honda Machi, this new rookie girl. She kind of reminds me of that one main protagonist from Psycho-Pass. What was her name?
Akane Sugimori.
Yeah, that her. She's kind of like this that, feels like as if she's fresh out of water, but it turns out that she's actually natural born professional, but not in the traditional sense, considering that in just first few episodes she's transferred to the same unit as Narihisago, because she also has the same ability to dive into ID wells, and that has to do with the events that happen during these first few episodes and her unique mindset. And that kind of ties her into this other character, Fukuda, or as he's known as Perforator, this sort of a serial killer who drills people's heads because he wants them to see if they can see the world like him, because he drilled his own head. And the same thing happens to her and she somehow survives, but it kind of creates this interesting relationship between the two, because after her frontal lobe on her head like this is pierced, it's implied but never confirmed that it somehow affected her moral conscience or in some way, or at least damaged in some way, which also allowed her the same ability to interact with the killer's minds, just like Narihisago. But it also created this interesting but twisted connection between her and Perforator. and how it's almost like a sort of a soul connection that you know they're shared by the same kind of thing, that they both chose to drill their own head, and they kind of have this very mutual but really disturbing respect for another. And but as much as I liked her relationship with him, I think Fukuda is actually my favorite character on this show. That he's so endlessly fascinating. What do you think about him?
One thing that I really like about this show is that character action actually has consequence going forward into the story, which we will be elaborate more later. I like Fukuda as a sort of like an anti-villain type character. I mean, he is a villain, a serial killer with heinous actions, but at the same time, he has his own, you know, honor code and a very unique moral views on the world, and you know how he interact with other people. He has this very unique backstory where he explained to us why, you know, he drill holes in his head. And unlike other, you know, type of show like this where, you know, villain of the day, one-off villain is taken care of and never show up again, he actually became a recurrent character and a very important one at that, you know, to the story. Not only just, you know, by expanding his relationship with Hondomachi, like you said, I also like his relationship with Narihisago, where they are often butting with each other when it comes to their own different worldview.
Yeah, and it's sort of a, you know, really ironic and interesting relationship, because it's like two different people with two different relationships. At first there is their ideal selves, you know, when they are like in the desert together, and how they have this mutual respect for another, and at least at first, and how they're, you know, working well together. But then contrast, you know, to their actual persons, you know, when they interact, that they Narihisago just despises Fukuda, even though he tries to be cordial as possible, but he is at the same time sort of a really sneaky character who kind of hides things that, you know, that he knows much more than, you know, that he lets on, that which, you know, Narihisago doesn't really take very well. But he kind of carries this show through, and I kind of wish that, you know, he would have had even more to do with the story, more other than introducing later to the second half. I mean, I kind of wish that the show would have maybe gone to the Silence of the Lambs route, that, you know, they kind of asked his advice, you know, more. Although they did kind of try to do that when he went to the ID well, but the only successful time they did it was, you know, when they went into that desert part. But I kind of wish they could have used more, because he kind of reminds me of that one serial killer from Mindhunters, who also assists the same criminal, because like him, he also has this, you know, high IQ. And unlike the other serial killers in this show, who are these really pathetic, you know, these self-deprecating people, he actually is very self-aware of himself. And the reason why he even chose to drill his head is actually something really compelling and sort of really sympathetic, but also twisted. That he actually had a, you know, very good sort of a moral event horizon that pushed him into that. It makes him really fascinating.
Isn't that what I just said, but smarter? I digress. But yeah, other than that, there is one other character, this Kaoru girl, you know, a mysterious girl that was always found dead whenever a brilliant detective jumped into an ID well. There's not much to say about her as a character, I suppose. I mean, she is mostly just plot point. Would you agree?
Yeah, I guess so. After all, she's one of the show's big mysteries that are revealed throughout and not solved until the end of this story, which kind of brings us to this one other character who is this major mystery to be solved, which is already obvious from the first episode with John Walker, this sort of a mysterious presence in each ID wells, like as if he's somehow responsible for these new serial killers and how he can somehow imprint in their minds. But when it comes to him as a villain, I don't know if it was you and me or if somebody else didn't see it coming. But when it comes to his reveal that who the person behind him is, we kind of saw it from a mile away. And we don't mean it like that we saw one of the clues and we immediately thought that, wow, that guy must be the John Walker. But no, it was something even dumber. It's the fact that even though the first episode didn't have any opening or even ending, if I remember correctly, the very first scene when we see that guy appear, just his character design and how he appears, we immediately thought to ourselves, that guy's evil. And it doesn't help by the fact that the ending visuals, that show him that he looks so obviously evil that, that why did they have to make him so obviously evil? But that's only the tip of the iceberg that, what makes him so really disappointing as a villain, because considering that the show tries to build up this really interesting mystery with it, if we would have been introduced to him more, that we got to know him, but the fact is, that guy only appears in a few scenes and, he's more like, a few lines like that, and he doesn't have much to do. And then when he's finally revealed as the John Walker, we are like, wow, I didn't see that coming. By the way, who are you again? That's how I felt like. And I think this kind of twist where a character is revealed to be the villain all along has been done so much better in so many different media. And I think one example is obviously Adachi from Persona 4, like how he got to know with the main character and, interact with his family and friends, and he has this comic relief, and we audience got to like him, that he's fun goofball, and then he's revealed to be this sort of a mastermind behind all these kidnappings and, killings, that it comes as a huge shock. But here, we don't feel anything because, I mean, I'm not saying that it came out of nowhere. I mean, I'm sure it was built up, but if we had at least gotten to know that guy, maybe gotten more hints, maybe it wouldn't have been such a massive letdown, because I, in fact, just thinking about it, makes me angry. Story! While ID Invaded at first, starts out as this case-by-case sort of plot structure, but it eventually moves into an ongoing plot. I mean, it's not just the John Walker mystery that they're trying to solve, but also dealing with Nari Hisako's past, but also the mystery behind the ID wells, that how they work, or as their more accurate name, Mizu Hanome system, or as I like to call it, the Matrix, because how can you not think of that, since they're jumping to these dimensions like that, you need to take the red pill or take the blue pill.
Or then also sprinkle in some Inception, because it well inside it wells.
Yeah, on top of a layer, on top of another layer.
Yeah, so I agree with you. It was kind of, the plot is very interesting because, it has a very natural progression, and every single detail is revealed to us gradually instead of a huge exposition dump. What I don't really like is the world building. It was kind of weak. I mean, in comparison to, for example, Psycho-Pass, in the first episode of Psycho-Pass, we are introduced to Akane as this rookie cop who, doesn't know anything about the world and the system that they are under. And, we are through her lens, being taught about the world and the system and everything about the Psycho-Pass world through another character who kind of explained everything to her. And it felt so natural and felt so good. We don't even need to feel like that we're confused or idiot. But here in this anime, there are a lot of concepts and stuff like, eat wells, guns that, can track, killing intents, a lot of stuff. But it wasn't, it was explained. There are scenes of that, but it wasn't execute well or explain to us, quite clearly, and I got confused at some point.
Yeah, although, well, I do admit that, world building in this anime is not as good as in Psycho-Pass, but I think the fact that it focuses on the mysteries and the cases themselves makes it, at least for me, sort of a minor nitpick, because I think when it comes to the mysteries that are prevalent in this entire story, the fact that there is no exposition dump in just one episode, or that we don't get to know anything until towards the end, that we are gradually given more and more information that we want to find out more in the next episode, like that it made us hooked and like that. And it's kind of helped by the fact that, since, like I said earlier, this show is a huge mind screw, with these mind-bending visuals and like that. And since we don't know about the true nature of the ID wells, it kind of keeps us thinking about that. What if it is all like this? What if it was this all along? And we just keep guessing and guessing again, but we never get it right. So the show is kind of pretty brilliantly built up in that sense, that with all the logical pieces falling together towards the end.
One thing that I really like, and I already mentioned it before, and I'm gonna talk about more in detail now, is how every single action done in this anime has consequence. Like for example, Fukuda action of drilling holes into people's head. While in other anime, you know, he drove holes in other anime people's head. He's just like your quirky villain, you know, and then you'll take out and then you not mention again. Here, his action not only has served as a plot important, it also served as a base point for character progression and, you know, relationship building dynamics between character. I mean, for example, I would give is, you know, Hondomachi isn't really his only victim. There was another guy who also got a hole in his head and actually survived the encounter. At some point in the story, Hondomachi and that guy meet up, which lead them to like a sort of a weird, you know, encounter, trying to understand each other, like, you know, why we are whole buddies. So like, you know, what is going on? You know, oh, I have holes in my head. Oh, you have holes in your head too? Yeah, let's be friends and right now. And then, you know, it led her to discovering this other, you know, serial killer, the rape digger, and, you know, and managed to capture her. And then the rape digger, while in the jail cell, interact with Fukuda, create this very interesting character dynamic. You know, I've rarely seen, you know, just a minor plot detail, such a minor action of, you know, just doing something has so huge, you know, connection to every single piece of story done before in a seasonal anime like this. And especially with the build up toward revealing who is this Kaoru girl is and how important she is to the plot and how she is connected to the Mizuhanome system. Yeah, Mizuhanome system. Oh my god, I butchered that so much. Anyway, how she connects to it. While it was a bit generic and predictable, I think that, you know, the resolution that it brought at the end was quite satisfying, not only to the character, but also to the mystery around her as itself. You know, it served important not only to Narihisaigo character plot arc, and it also, you know, make Momoki an important character for 5 minutes. So, I mean, it was good. I mean, it was acceptable. I mean, I think, you know, for the most part, the story was successful. Like, if only the villain was better, but I digress.
Yeah, so I think the only thing we have left to talk about is the music and animation, because those, you know, are the other important part of this whole thing. Music and animation! So, from what I understand, we are a bit split on how do we feel about the opening. I mean, I think that, you know, it looks okay. I mean, sure, there might be some recycled footage and like that, but I think when it comes to imaginative visuals to make it look like a sort of a mind screw anime that ID Invaded is, I think worked pretty well. And it's not like with Pofuri where they literally just show some pictures of and some few scenes that of the events that happen in the anime, even if it's brand new animation, but there's nothing imaginative about it.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I think we can agree on is that the opening song was quite good. I mean, it fit the theme of the show really well. It was hype. What I don't like is that, you know, even though it has imaginative, you know, visuals because it has the abstract shape, it also at the same time, you know, reuse, you know, footage from the first episode as some sort of like, you know, a backdrop, and it just play in the background, you know, frame by frame, and, you know, showing some certain scene from the first episode. I mean, that approach is fine. I absolutely, you know, has no criticism toward that. I mean, you know, some anime does that, and it's, you know, it actually worked. But for this one, I kind of wish that, you know, instead of just having footage from the first episode, it would have, you know, evolving footage, you know, just like, you know, School Life, you know, it would have, you know, footage from other episodes, especially when there are a lot of major plot point going on in the episode 8 and 9. That way it would have, you know, these different footage to be used in the opening. But I think, you know, most of that is just nitpicking because, you know, Despite my hate for my initial distaste for it, I mean, it was fine.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure whether the fact that, the first episode's footage was shown in the opening every episode was due to the fact that that location, serves a purpose later. But from what I understand, as opposed to the opening, you at first hated the ending, not because of its visuals, but because of its song, because it presents this genre of music that you've never liked, but somehow it eventually grew on you. So.
Yeah, I mean, the music for this ending is by Miyavi, a really famous Japanese guitar singer. He has a lot of good banger songs, not only in this ending, but also in some other insert song that was used in action scene throughout the anime. And I think for the most part, his vocals fit the chaotic nature of the show really well, especially the lyrics of the song, which is mostly in English, talking about, the nature of, the mind and stuff. It was cool. Visuals, I think that it kind of reminded me a lot of True Detective openings visuals. You have, character face showing up in the backdrop, and then it's fade into, trees and, building. I don't know whether or not this is a direct tribute to it or just a coincidence. That remains to be discussed.
When it comes to the animation, I think, as I've said many times before already, the animation is so great when it comes to mind-bending action. Although, to be honest, when it comes to the action that happens in real life, not in the ID wells, I don't really care for that stuff at all.
Yeah.
Especially when some of those scenes are really hilarious.
Yeah.
But whenever they are in ID wells, it's such a joy to watch, with these different dimensions, with the different color schemes and different sort of theme with the mind of the killer that is inside there, and sort of a different type of music feeling to it.
Yeah, I mean, every single ID well dimension is unique and stand out. You have these world where it's just a single waterfall full of people running around trying to escape this one sniper dude killing them, or you have this infinite train going toward in a circle. Totally not a reference to Demon Slayer Infinite Train arc. And also you have this, weird apartment building exploding world. A lot of creative visual and imaginative, mind-bending action going on. So it was so good and engaging. The nitpick I have, which I mentioned when I gave the overall feeling about this anime, is the character model itself, because certain scene, especially toward the end, the character model looks a bit messy and look off. I mean, you can look on their face like they saw the animator draw their eye halfway, because their head is so square shaped that their eyes just poke out to the side, and you look like they just have half their eye cut off. But other than that, I think it was serviceable.
Yeah, and I think that word also describes the soundtrack of this anime, that for a mystery show, the music fits, with this jazzy theme. How many anime have we already seen that has that sort of feeling to it? But I thought that, it fit the action scenes and the moody atmosphere perfectly. Conclusion. So, if I were to give my highest compliment to ID Invaded, I think I would say it was better than I expected it to be. And I'm not saying this as a form of an insult, but I'd say it is so much better than Inspector by a mile, like many miles. And while I think that the cast is really flat compared to the three main characters, but with its good visuals and mind screw action, and also with that really good build up to the mystery with each episode with the different clues. Well, aside from that main villain, because we saw it a mile away.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really solid show all the way through.
I mean, it is very good in the sense that it is better than other shows that I've seen so far. It's also for an anime that kind of trying to achieve a a tiny speck of, shadow that was the greatness that is Psycho-Pass Season 1. I think this anime, was quite entertaining. There are stuff that could be improved, but I think I did saw the passion that the studio behind it put into this anime, and the show did end on a really good note. It doesn't even need a season 2. Conclusion was good. Everyone is happy. It's trying to tease this, new beginning.
Yeah, although from what I understand, you like this anime more than that other anime that we watch after we finish watching this, but I guess we'll find out in part 2. But that's it for part 1. We'll be talking about Perfect Insider in part 2, so we'll see you there. Until then, we'll see you right after these messages. Thank you for watching part 1 of our discussion. If you're interested of the other anime we talked about, please click the link for part 2, which also includes our recommendations. I'm Giman, and I'll see you soon enough. To be continued in part 2!